Hello, Mr. Alberto, and happy finals week. So, introducing my name, it is Mallory Halford. I'm in Section A. So the first question you asked was explaining misconceptions. So misconceptions in science are preconceived notions that a student has from prior knowledge coming in. These are just what they've been told by their environment, their family, their religion, whatever it is that they have been told and believe in. So some of the things, like an example of that would be kind of like that lightning never strikes in the same place twice. That's like a myth. It's what people always say, because if you stand in the same spot, the likelihood of it coming in that exact same spot is unlikely, but there's no scientific proof saying that it doesn't. And so that's an idea that someone has prior knowing. Another one would be like the North Star is the brightest star in the sky, which in our night sky it could possibly be, but in the universe, no. There's been not enough research to show that that one is the brightest star in the sky, but we're told that because that's what people see and that's what we believe in. And then how I can change student misconceptions would be to kind of have them work really hard in that explore part, because having them fail means that they're showing what they've known from the past or what they believe would work from what they've either done or haven't done or just believe, and then watching them fail. So that changes their perspective on a misconception and can change their mindset. Another way would be to have a bulletin board in my room and just have it changed out every few weeks about new misconceptions that have come out and have been proven wrong, and we can work on that like once a week, have an assignment for it, and then have them mess around with those ideas. Okay, so the NGSSS 5E system is explained in 5 steps, where if I were to define it myself, I would say is a progression of building on students' knowledge of a science misconception. So in the engage part, this is where you ask questions and you hook them. It can be a story, it can be a puzzle, it can be something that gets their mind joggling about what we're going to be doing, having that curiosity factor come into it. And explore is fail. It's where a student needs to believe that it is not easy, like things are not given. You have to work and discover and dig deeper into it and essentially just fail. And so then you go into the explain portion, where you explain to them how something works, why it is the way it is, and then have them start to be like, oh, okay, and then really digging deeper. And so each time you go farther and farther, you dig deeper and deeper. And then elaborate. This is where students are given the information after failing. So failing, knowing what went wrong, what went right, explaining why those things went wrong and what went right, and then doing it, showing that they comprehended those first 2 steps above it to be able to follow through with the experiment and knowing exactly what they're learning by doing. And then evaluate is assessment, formative or summative. You ultimately want to do authentic, but in science, a lot of assessment comes from hands-on observation, and then sometimes worksheets, which are more summative, or like quizzes and whatnot. And then going into the progression of standards, so my definition of it is basically like learning is a developmental process with constant revision. It is a physically and mentally enhancing way of learning through a progression. It's going into depth with things in every aspect. So an example of this, I pulled up 4th grade, since this was what my unit plan was over and where my practicum was based, and some of the DCIs were how it starts with natural resources, so what's given in your environment and what changes, what doesn't change, and what we surround ourselves with, and then it progresses into natural hazards. So we have weather implementing, and just like human errors were like fires and stuff like that. And then it goes into designing solutions to the problem. So that is what I did for my foldable. So the end part of the last part of the DCI was the designing solutions. So we created a weather hazard foldable. So each one has what to do, how to prepare, and where to take shelter, and how to prepare for those natural hazards. So, and then you asked us to dive into a 5th grade teacher mindset when working with 5 PSI-3. So that standard is matter and its interactions. Identify materials based on their properties. Powder and metal is an example. So I actually looked back, and you don't actually, before you were taught that, you're taught it prior in 2nd grade. So 3 years prior, every grade between 2nd grade and 5th grade does not cover matter and its interactions, except for in 2nd grade. So before that, you are learning about how things can be assembled and made into a new project. So like putting together or disassembling things to see how they interact with one another. So this would be like trying to build a house with bricks and then a stick on top and then bricks. It just, you notice how things are working together and how they're not working together. And then the 5th grade standard is like, how are their properties? Like, what makes them different than one another? And then afterward, it goes into middle school, where it's gathering a sense of information to describe synthetic materials that where they come from and how they impact society. So this could be materials that are not man-made, or how we use them in our society, and how like we adapt with all of these things. Okay, so one of the last things you had us touch on was the engineering design. So to explain this, I remember vividly being in class and seeing it, but you kind of already know it. But it goes in a circular motion. So it starts with asking a question and then imagining how that question can be implemented, planning how you would create this, and like blueprinting and getting those ideas onto paper, and then creating, hands-on, failing, not failing, designing a solution, and then ask. So what worked? What didn't? What do I need to fix? What ideas can I keep going off of? And then you go right back to ask again. So the ask comes twice, essentially, because it starts as like a beginning question, and then it ends up being a question for yourself, and then it can keep going to be a question for your project, your solution, and then you imagine what you could do better, and it just keeps going. So an example of this was when I worked with my group on our class presentation, and so we had students read the story of the 3 little pigs and ask themselves, like, which one was working better. Like, we asked questions after reading it, like, which material worked better, which did not, what kind of things do we have in our environment. And so then it goes into imagining. So we then had them be given their stuff and imagining how they're going to create a house that's going to prevent from flooding. So then they planned by creating a blueprint, and they had it where they could, there's a mailman. So we had it where they could like draw it out for the next time. So they failed the first time, and then they created a blueprint, and then they created that. After they failed, they got their new supplies. They got to pick out what they want, create what they want, see what was working, what wasn't working with other groups with bricks, sticks, and hay. And then they improved. So after they were done, they got to see how they got to use all the materials and how they can improve on like what things they could use that were in a bigger spectrum and not just like Lego bricks. So they would ask themselves, they would be like, I worked with Lego bricks, but cement in real life would work so much better. Like if we had concrete, we would be good, you know? All right, we're at the end. So this semester, I had a great time in science class. It was my favorite class to go to during the week. I think all of the assignments that you had us do leading up to the final were extremely helpful. I learned, I got first in the Kahoot, and sometimes I wasn't at class, but what you taught was very much informed and learned throughout the semester. Some of my favorites were when our classmates got to present and show like a 5E lesson plan completed fully in front of us and show how fun it can be and how much we can interact with kids, even though we're like 20 to 22-year-old specimens trying to act like a 5-year-old, but it was still fun. Like, we could still have fun doing it. Something that I didn't like as much was just the bulletin board assignment, but that's because it was a little rushed. I felt like the timing with it was just off. I didn't feel like I had enough time with everything else going on to be able to fully participate in that, and I love decorating, so but I thought it was a great assignment. I liked the idea of it. It's like one of those little things that you don't notice you need to learn to do that can be beneficial, and I like those little hidden Easter eggs. But overall, I had a great semester, and I loved working and talking with you throughout the semester, and you're very accommodating with me, and I appreciate that. So I hope you have a great winter break. Farewell.